RuPaul surprised us all when he suddenly announced one day that he'd gotten married. He's always been super secretive about his private life, but over the years he dropped a few bombshells. He opened up about some pretty unbelievable things about his husband and the relationship, so listen closely because the truth about his marriage will shock you. Being as wildly famous and well known as RuPaul is, it's amazing how he manages to keep his personal life and private life so separate. Because we see so much of him on TV and in the media, it might feel like we know RuPaul pretty well, but the reality is that he has managed to keep his personal life a mystery over the years, and we only know what he's willing to tell us. The funny thing is that he thinks people don't necessarily want to know what goes on in his private life. In 2013, he told Oprah that his love life was not something that people were actually interested in, adding that of course he did have a love life, and that he'd been with his man for almost 2 decades by that point. Now they're approaching 3 decades together, which is just amazing. RuPaul also spoke to Entertainment Tonight about another reason why he also was so private about what goes on with him romantically, and it actually makes a lot of sense.
Separate from, Yes.
But like I said before, there are things he shared that he's happy for the public to know about, like how he and his husband Georges LeBar first met back in 1994, and their meet cute story is both funny and sweet.
I met him on the dance floor at Limelight.
RuPaul mentioned in another interview that one of the things that he first noticed about Georges was his height. Standing at 6'4", it's not every day that RuPaul meets someone who's taller than him, but Georges is 6'8" and apparently has been that height since he was 12 years old. So after RuPaul asked the Australian stranger what he was doing, he then wanted to know if he could put his arms around him. He explained that he'd never been able to put his arms around someone's shoulder who was taller than him. According to a report by Screen Rant, 7 days later, the brand new couple were already head over heels and living their best lives. They apparently joined Elton John on his private jet and traveled across Europe together, and the rest is history. Being so in love and having been together for so long, you would think that the pair would have jumped at the chance to get married the moment that it was legalized in the US. But if you know anything about RuPaul, then you probably know that he prefers to go against the grain, and he is not the kind of person to just settle comfortably inside the box of conventionalism. And for a long time, he felt that way about marriage. In 2015, he told BuzzFeed News that he wasn't interested in tying the knot because he had no desire to do the same thing as everybody else. In true RuPaul fashion, he declared that he didn't stand on ceremony and that he never wanted to conform to anything. He knew that he and his partner were committed to each other, so they didn't need anything else to prove that.
That paper don't mean nothing.
Which is why we were all a little shocked when 2 years later he turned around and out of the blue said that they'd gotten married. But did he suddenly have a change of heart about the importance of marriage? Well, not exactly. It turns out that his reasons for having a wedding weren't romantic.
You know what? Let's do it. Let's just do it.
Definitely a more practical reason to say I do, but when you're as wealthy as RuPaul and his husband, it's a pretty important one. He elaborated on why he got married in an interview with The Guardian. He admitted that getting married was conventional, but that it wasn't their goal. Their goal was to use the system to make it work for them. RuPaul added that he didn't give an F about marriage, but what he did care about was that if anything happened to him or Georges, their assets would be protected. But he also revealed something else about their marriage in that interview that a lot of people might find pretty shocking. When asked for the secret to his relationship's longevity, RuPaul claimed that a lot of it had to do with the fact that they were in an open relationship. He went on to explain that they were so confident in their love for one another that they felt secure enough to not be exclusive. He confessed that if Georges needed to do something else somewhere else, he was fine with that, explaining that his husband was respectful of him and that he would never turn it into something that would make RuPaul feel uncomfortable, and that he wouldn't do that to Georges either. He concluded to have that on his planet was crazy. It was rare. RuPaul broached the subject again with Vanity Fair in an interview where he got up close and personal. When he was asked why he and his partner decided on an open marriage, RuPaul gave what might call a controversial answer.
The hoax is that monogamy is actually something that can actually happen.
Of course, a lot of people out there would highly disagree with that statement. The topic of monogamy and open relationships has caused a lot of contrasting opinions over the years, and RuPaul wasn't shy about entering the conversation. He explained that he wouldn't want to put restraints on the person he loved most on the planet, clarifying that he wouldn't do that to somebody he loved, his very best friend. Later in the interview, he also shared something about why being open worked for him and Georges that was honestly heartwarming.
I wouldn't want to put restraints on the person I love the most on this planet.
But there's something else about RuPaul and George's life choices that is also seriously controversial. You see, they own a 60,000 acre ranch in Wyoming. I know, not somewhere that you'd necessarily picture RuPaul spending a lot of time. Apparently, George's inherited it from a family member and he spends most of his time there.
What do you do on 60,000 acres?
Well, I do nothing.
But before you start imagining RuPaul walking around the estate feeding chickens and milking cows in his Western getup, the couple don't actually have any of their own animals on the land. And the way that they get money from the property is a lot more taboo.
Which is you lease out the mineral rights.
But what RuPaul failed to mention in that interview is that when he said they leased mineral rights, supposedly that meant that they'd allowed fracking to take place on their estate. According to a report by The Guardian, after a Twitter user heard what RuPaul had said about how he used his land, he did some investigating. And by checking on Frack Tracker, a non-profit group that collects data on fracking sites, he found that RuPaul's property had over 35 active oil and gas wells. RuPaul hasn't publicly commented on this, but there's a chance that the leases to the fracking companies would add a lot to his net worth, which is honestly a little surprising considering that with his profitable drag empire, you'd think that he and his husband really wouldn't need the extra money. But what does the future hold for this couple? It seems that they have thought about having kids, but decided against it. RuPaul told The Guardian that if he and Georges were to have a child, then being a parent would become his full-time job because he didn't have enough time to give kids what they need in order to prosper and grow. And there was another pretty amusing reason why RuPaul wasn't up for being a parent. He explained that although he loved kids, he never wanted to have them because he'd have to deal with other parents. He elaborated that people were insane and it would be terrible for his kid because he'd be telling off the other parents. At the same time though, it seems that he hasn't shut down the idea of parenthood entirely because he also added that it could still happen. If Georges wanted to do it, then he would. So while RuPaul and his husband have a relationship that some people might find unconventional, I think there's no doubt that they truly love each other. But what do you guys think? Were you surprised about how up RuPaul was about his open relationship? What do you think about the controversial way that they are profiting from their land in Wyoming? Let me know in the comments below.